Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be continuing our series on effective conflict resolution. If you've ever gotten into a discussion that turned into an argument where you wanted one thing and the other person wanted something else, and you felt like if they got what they want, you couldn't get what you want, then you were likely arguing from a place of positions. In our previous series, what we've been talking about are mental frameworks that will help you with conflict resolution. There's a video that you'll want to check out that we talked about the role renegotiation model, and then the one we did last week was about conflict styles or general approaches that we and others take to a conflict situation. Today we're going to start talking the first skill you need if you're going to resolve difficult conflict situations effectively, and that is moving from positions to interests. Let's get started. Thanks for tuning in today, everyone. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my videos by clicking that button down below. Today we are continuing our series on conflict resolution, and we're talking the first skill, which is moving from positions to interests. What is a position? The position is what each party thinks in their head will solve their particular need, and it's usually what most people bring to the argument. I want this to happen, you say. If we're going out to eat, I want to eat Chinese. Well, I want to eat Middle Eastern. Okay, well, and you see at this point, if people are really locked into just their positions, there's nowhere to go with that. One, we can't have a solution because at the level of position, they're mutually incompatible. You can't get what you want if I get what I want, and vice versa. The position is the solution you propose and the solution that I propose. Those are our positions. It's the what we want to see happen. Interests are what drives the solutions. The position is what we think will meet our need. Our interests are the needs themselves. The need, the fear, the desire, the concern, the why we want what we say we want. So I may want to eat Chinese because my real concern is for my health, and I just think that will help me lose weight. You may want to eat Lebanese food because you are allergic to MSG. So our interests, when we start getting down to the level of interest, those aren't mutually compatible. Can we have healthy food that doesn't have MSG? That gives us a place to move forward. Let me see if I can illustrate a little bit further. And this one actually goes back into history as to how moving from positions to interest actually help. If you notice my wonderful artwork here, this is actually meant to be a place on the globe, and it's 1978. And since very few people will, this is, by the way, another clue. If you've read the classic work Getting to Yes by Fischer and Ury, that is a classic in the field of conflict resolution. They talk about this example. So, but for those who don't, this is the Mediterranean. Okay, which makes this Egypt. This is Israel, which makes this piece the Sinai. It's 1978. Both sides are searching for a way to come to peace, and the issue at hand is what to do about Sinai. Now, if you go back in a little bit of history, there had been some wars between these folks here. And in the most recent one, the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Israel took Sinai and was now in possession. At this point at the negotiation table, so now it's 5 years later at the negotiation table, Egypt has a position, and very simply it is give Sinai back and we can have peace. Israel's position is also equally clear. There is no way we will give you Sinai back in order to attain peace. So at the level of positions, notice that it's mutually incompatible. Give it to me? No. So where can you go from this? Fortunately, both sides brought it deeper. They dropped into the level and began to question one another about their interests. So Egypt, why do you need Sinai back? Why is it such a big deal? Well, also knowing a little bit about history, it had only been some 12, 15 years earlier that Egypt had finally gained its own independence. It had been run by conquerors or administered by conquerors since before the Christian era. And it only recently become a self-sustaining state. There's no way that a negotiator could come back from negotiations with Israel and say, oh, by the way, yes, that was our land, but we gave it to Israel and we're good with it. They couldn't have even compromised. If you saw our conflict styles video last week, one approach is to compromise where you take half and I take half. Compromise would not have worked. Their interest was national pride. We have to have our land. Our land is our land. So emotional, and it's around national pride. Well, Israel, what is your need? What is your interest? Well, and that one wasn't too hard to guess either. Okay, so Israel had its War of Independence in the late 1940s. In 1967, there was the Six-Day War, in which Egypt was one of the antagonists or protagonists, but against Israel, and had fought. And then the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And in both of these, Israel was very nearly overrun. Its question was national security. It could not afford to have Egyptian tanks in the Sinai right next to its border. So we've turned from give me Sinai, no you can't have it, which is the two positions, to I need to retain national pride. Oh, and I need to have security ensured. Now we have a basis for a conversation. Now we have a basis for a real negotiation. Is there some way where you can get what you want and I can get what I want, where our needs, our interests can be met if we'll shift our positions? And that's what a good discussion around interest does, is it enables us to move from antagonists with one another to sitting side by side and problem solving to see if there is a way where we can both get what we both want. And in fact, that was the solution. If you go back to that time, what was they agreed on was that Sinai would be a demilitarized zone. Israel said, Egypt, you can have it back, just no tanks. It's funny, I remember as a child watching, I believe it was on CBS, if I can go back, TVs were about this big. There was a little knob you turned to get to 3 or 4 channels. And I was watching one day, home from school, and they were making this big deal. It was a desert scene, and the Israeli flag was coming down in this fort, and the Egyptian flag was going up. It was a big deal. I had no idea what it was about, but it was about the handover of Sinai from Israel back to Egypt, and it's what enabled the first treaty between Israel and any of her Arab neighbors when Anwar Sadat flew to Jerusalem and met with Menachem Begin. So, powerful. That's a real historical example of how interest can help us. And I'm going to show you one more in a picture that I will flash up on the screen in just a moment that shows some of my clients this past week who were using interest to help them get past their conflict. So we're talking skill number 1, moving from positions to interests. And as we've already mentioned, here's our example, our definitions of both position and interest, and the example that I just gave you about what happened in the negotiations over the Sinai. Now, great that it works for geopolitics, but does it really work for you and me and how we figure out things in our company or in our relationships at home? I would say yes, it does. Earlier this week, I was actually working with an executive team. One of the issues that they're getting at is how do we do conflict in a way that's more productive? And so taught them this and some other skills, some of which we'll be rolling out to you soon. And then we got to the point where it's like, okay, let's actually begin to do some work on this. And Mark and Jeff identified a conflict. That is, how much involvement should Jeff have in operational issues when that's really under Mark's purview? Now, when we started talking, I asked them, okay, so let's define the conflict in a way that is non-judgmental. And what you see on the screen there is their definition. This is what we're saying without saying who's right or who's wrong. What it's about is Jeff's involvement. So then the question was, okay, so what do you each want to see happen? And that came to their positions. So Mark's position was really simple. Mark is over operations, and Mark said, I make the call, and I will involve Jeff whenever I think it's appropriate. So turn to Jeff. Jeff, very simply, what is your position? And Jeff said, I get called in too late. I want to be called sooner about important issues. And again, at this level of just talking at positions, neither one of them is going to be happy. Okay, Jeff is going to keep needling because he doesn't feel like he's included often enough. Mark is going to get irritated that this keeps coming up when it's under his purview. So then I asked them the simple question, so tell us why. You say, Mark, that it's about you making the call. Why? What's your real interest here? And Jeff, you say, call me in sooner. Why do you want what you say you want? And that's when they talked about efficiency. That was Mark's. Basically, for me to try to come find you, Jeff, and to keep track of all these things that you think might be important slows me down. And I want to work in a way that's efficient. Okay. Jeff says, well, you know what? I'm not confident in who we have on board underneath you. And I'm seeing some slips that are happening and increased costs. My interest in being called in more often and sooner is about managing the costs and maintaining our competitive edge, which is in their company and in their industry, low cost wins. So they now have their interests out on the table. And it's a very different conversation. Now, they did not fix it there. We spent probably half an hour on this before we moved on. I did get the phone call the next day, actually the email, it came to me through email, saying that they had met again after I had left and that they had able to work this through to a solution that they both found acceptable. How did we get there? We got there because we moved the conversation from I want this, which is around positions, to tell us why you want what you want. Let's be honest and open about this. And then let's come shoulder to shoulder and see, let's problem solve to see if we can find a way where both of our interests are met. Thanks for tuning in today, everyone. We've been talking the first skill in effective conflict resolution, that is moving from positions to a discussion around interests. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to check out my 2 previous videos on this subject, which had to do with the role renegotiation model as a way of understanding the dynamics behind conflict, and then the video produced just last week on conflict styles, the general approaches people bring towards conflict and being able to select those styles intelligently so that you move forward. Please do subscribe to the videos, to this channel. That little click and any thumbs up you can give me down below really is an encouragement to me, but it also helps me on a very practical level. YouTube opens up different ways for me to market the channel once I get a certain number of subscribers. So please be one of those that help me move forward. We're going to do some more videos on conflict resolution in the coming weeks. This is such a perennial need for companies, for individuals, for life. How do we move past this so that we can work effectively with others? Please come back because we're going to be talking more skills on how to address conflict resolution. Until next time, be well.